Welcome back to the Women's Basketball Summit, the online platform for players, coaches, and parents. Today, my guest is Lance Walker. He is the Global Director at Michael Johnson Performance, and we're just going to be talking about training the female athlete. We'll make it specific to basketball. So, Lance, welcome to the call.
Thanks. I look forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I mean, I first heard you speak at the Perform Better in June, and I love the stuff you shared, so I'm excited you were willing to go on this. So for everyone that's not familiar with you, let's talk about your bio, your background, but let's start with your time as an athlete.
Well, I tell the story. I was probably the worst athlete that ever actually got playing time in Division I football. I don't know how I ever got to play. I ended up going to a Kansas State University to play football out of high school. That was the worst program in Division I football history at that time. And a guy by the name of Bill Snyder recruited me. Nobody knew who Bill Snyder was. Now everybody knows who Bill Snyder is. And somehow, some way, I was a college football player. I ended up having more knee surgeries than catches as a wide receiver in 5 years there. And I think I missed more practice days than I did receiving yards as a wide receiver. So I got a lot of time with strength coaches and physios and doctors and sports medicine professionals in my time as an athlete. So I really spent more time on that side of it than I did the right side of it, which was out on the field playing, which was probably why they got the program turned around so well, as I wasn't out there messing them up. But back from that, I mean, I think it's important to understand where I came from was a small town where we played all the sports, or you didn't have enough to field a team. So when it was fall, it was football. When it was winter, it was basketball. And spring, it was track. And in the summer, it was baling hay and building fence. And those were the four sports in my town. And there was about 20 or so, 25 of us guys that played all those sports all the time. And that was my athletic development. There was no weight rooms. There was no, summer conditioning programs. It was basically you play the sport to get better at the sport. And that's how we developed athletically. We also had a PE. In my school, from very small grade school all the way through high school, we had mandatory PE. So that was my development as an athlete, was living on the farm, playing multiple sports, and getting some good physical education along the way that really helped me.
Nice. I mean, I know obviously today physical education is missing in most schools. So once you left college, did you get right into being like a sports performance coach, a strength coach?
Yeah, after my fifth year as a medical at Kansas State, I was kind of using most of my time as a student coach on the sidelines. I was unable to play, so I was doing more coaching than I was playing and practicing, and kind of got the buzz for coaching. I thought that was kind of cool. That was probably a better place for me to be than out on the field. Was actually behind the scenes, helping with strategy and planning and that sort of thing. And got really interested along the way in this whole process of why I got injured. What could I have done to avoid those injuries? I saw teammates of mine get injured. It didn't make any sense to me. I mean, our starting running back blew his ACL out right in front of me during the spring game, and watched him get back from the spring game all the way to opening the season as our starting running back in a very small amount of time. For those of you that were talking ACLs, know how short a timeline that would be in college football. How was he able to do that? What in the world went on there? That's amazing, because I just saw his career die in front of me, or what I thought. So really sparked an interest in me. I tried to get into physical therapy school, didn't get in. My grades weren't good enough. I think I'd probably majored in college football instead of pre-physical therapy, and that probably hurt my grades. But I did get into a graduate program at the University of Oklahoma, an exercise physiology program that was at that point loosely tied with the athletic program down there, and was hired to be a GA. Dr. Michael Bembin and his group in OU, be a GA and help run their exercise physiology lab in Norman, and started doing some research with some of the athletic teams down there. The golf team was one of the first teams that I worked with. I did my thesis study on the wrestling team. And along the way, got friendly with the strength conditioning staff at OU, and found a way to begin to merge my graduate school with being an assistant coach with them. So that started my assistant strength conditioning coaching in the early 90s. I think that was 93 that I met Joe Jurassic, Blair Prince, some of these the names that I'm sure a lot of people recognize from the S&C world. That was back in the day when the staffs of S&Cs on college campuses did every sport. So there was three of us. Coach Chris Dawson, who was also on staff there, he's the head strength conditioning coach for Kansas State Wildcats. He was working with basketball at the time, so I worked with him a lot at OU. But it was a small staff that worked with all the sports at a major college, and so it got a lot of cool experience being a GA in the lab, but also being a full-time assistant, grunt assistant, mind you, with the University of Oklahoma, working with all those different sports across multiple Olympic sports as well as Division I football. And still felt like after 3 years of doing that, getting my grad degree, that I still wasn't ready to be a really good coach. I really didn't feel like – I felt like there was a missing piece there because I was still seeing people get hurt. I was still seeing people go off to get rehab and then come back to me. And yet when they came back to me, they were still hurt, basically. You know, they weren't injured, but they weren't healthy either. And I was like, what's going on here? And it rekindled the fire for me to try to get into physical therapy school. So I was allowed to somehow, by the grace of the University of Oklahoma, allowed to get into their physical therapy program at the Health Sciences Center and be an assistant coach with the athletics department at the same time. So it was a very painful way to go about going to PT school. I'll promise you that. Not really focused on PT school per se. I was trying to have a full-time job and do PT school at the same time, but did that, became a physio, went out and practiced physical therapy for a while on the East Coast, opening clinics for Health South to get really get some skins on the wall, and very quickly learned that that's not my calling either. My calling truly is to use all this background, from the physiology research to the S&C background to my own physical education background as an athlete, and merge it with this physical therapy space to leverage all that for the betterment of the athletes that I wanted to work with in a sports environment, sports community. So left physical therapy as a full-time job and came back and started one of the first sports medicine programs at a high school that was in Oklahoma City at the time. And they were trying to compete against these big schools down here in Dallas. And they had multiple injuries, multiple problems. I mean, it was a great school. It was an unbelievable group of student body there, but physically they were just getting mauled, and they wanted to bring in a structure and a system and a staffing and a process to help them win more championships against these bigger, stronger, faster teams, but also to reduce the number of injuries. And one of the injuries that they had very common was female ACLs. I think I rehabbed 6 of them my first year there. Coming in as the sports medicine guide, I was rehabbing 6 fresh ACLs from the previous year basketball season. And again, head scratcher. Why is that happening? How do I eliminate those things going forward in my tenure there? But that was a 3-year period of time there that I learned a great deal about young athletes, their transition up to that college level, which I just come from, and then got the opportunity by Coach Jurassic, who was at the Cowboys at that time, said, look, let's go ahead and fill in the full bracket here. You need some professional experience. Why don't you come work with us at the Cowboys? And he was working at the time down there with Coach Campo's staff, brought me in. Coach Campo got fired about mid-season. So I was all wondering, did I make the right decision to leave this high school job and get into the NFL game? Luckily, Coach Parcells came in and kept some of us on staff, luckily. So I was able to ride that out for the 2003-2004 NFL season with the Cowboys. And at that time kind of filled in the whole bracket, right? The full spectrum, I felt like anyway. And decided at that point, hey, it's time for me to now really venture into a space where I can leverage all this experience. And really the only place at that point in time was the private sector. And so did some consulting on some private sector deals, and then met Michael Johnson. And Michael was looking to build his vision of athlete development for kids and elite athletes here in Dallas. We met, hit it off, and I'd say within 10 minutes of us meeting, we were in the next 3 hours of that first meeting, we were in process of planning and designing what is MJP USA right now, which is now in its 12th year of leveraging all that stuff for the betterment of whatever athlete walks in the door.
Nice. I mean, that's quite a background. So I'm glad you shared that, because everyone listening, obviously, you have trained everyone. You got a nice blend of the physical therapy and the sports performance. So as the global director at Michael Johnson Performance, what kind of is your role and responsibility?
So overall, it's the grand scope of the company, which our mission is to allow any athlete to realize their fullest potential, regardless of age, gender, competitive level, disability, sport, doesn't matter. So sometimes we're thought of as that's where the elite athletes go, or that's where the track athletes go. Yeah, we get a lot of that. but we also get a lot of the 9-year-old soccer kids that just want to get off the bench, and everything in between, sort of left to right on the competitive scale. But then also we have this vertical scale of the health continuum that we deal with. So as a physio, we were able to integrate the sports medicine component into that model, where we can also work with folks, as early as status post day one ACL recovery, as an example, all the way up to the day before the NFL Combine and everything in between. So it's kind of this crosshatch, really, of a competitive level and sport, and then crossing that off with that other dimension of the health continuum, and in a truly integrated fashion. So I think that's my daily challenge as global director, is to make sure that we're staying in best practices there. As we've grown over the last 12 years, we've got a staff of about 30 there at MJP Texas right now, give or take the time of year that balloons up. I think we had close to 60 staff this summer for all the off-site things that we do with the area high schools. I've got staff right now in Dubai. We open up MJP Dubai next month, which I've got a staff there. I've got a staffers that staff some of our licensing partners, one of which is in the Philippines. He'll be leaving here in a few weeks to set up shop in Nusa National University in the Philippines to run that center for them. We've had practitioners in Western Europe at St. George's Park for the English FA's Center of Excellence for Soccer. I've had specialists stationed in Eastern Europe and Azerbaijan. I've had specialists in China. We've had as many as 3 in China at one time. And I've had as many as 2 specialists in south of the equator, both in a couple of different partnerships down in South America, in Brazil. So it's sort of what it does is it forces me to be the global performance director. Sounds global because it really is. We're hubbing everything out of the global spot right here in Dallas, Texas, and that flows from me through my directors, through their leads, and through those coaches that are actually, and therapists that are day-to-day working with those coaches and athletes on the ground where the rubber meets the road.
Nice. I mean, I love that, a good solid sports performance program, as we're just branching it out, hoping to get to as many athletes. So you were talking about female athletes, when you were working at the high school, you had 6 that were coming off ACL injuries. What type of female athletes, sports teams are you seeing coming in, and are you seeing the ACL injury?
Yeah, well, we see a lot of female athletes. When we first started out, it was predominantly a male-dominated clientele. It was probably, 80-20 split on males versus females across the whole age spectrum. Certainly, as you got up into the elites and professional athletes, that scaled to 90-10 because there wasn't a lot of professional elite female athletes that were seeking these sorts of services. What that's done is it's kind of shifted. So the youth side of the business, I would say it's closer to 60-40 right now in terms of the male-female mix. We work down into age 6 now too, so that's also skewed up. So we're actually probably 50-50 on the younger you go. The older you go, it tends to skew more to the 60-40. Sports across the full spectrum. We're also seeing a lot more professional elite female athletes. So a lot of female track athletes. I think 2 or 3 of the fastest 10 humans in the last 10 years we've actually worked with, either in a training or a rehab mode here. So we get a lot of freaks, which is kind of cool. It kind of helps us understand that the physiology textbooks, they were not written for freaks. They were written for whoever normal is. And a lot of the people that we work with at that level are not normal. So it really forces us to stay innovative, to stay open-minded, and to unfortunately here and there sacred cows get butchered around our space, because if you follow the rules or the theories, you go out of business with these elites. And so we're able to kind of pull from that genre of athlete back into what is normal, and scale that depending upon ages. We do a lot of age specific training. But to answer your question, we still see ACLs, right? And we probably see what a lot of the other people that have talked on your show talked about, is we're seeing more and more of them, and we're seeing them younger and younger. That's not news to anybody, right? I mean, it's, I look outside, I can tell you it's raining. I mean, congratulations. I'm a genius. Yeah, it's raining. I'm kind of tired of talking about it. I really am. I'm kind of tired of talking about it, that, oh, look at all these ACLs, look at the incidents, look at this. And it's like a Chicken Little. We're all kind of throwing our hands up in the air. We got to get to some solutions here, folks, and stop, all of us sitting around at conferences talking about these incidence rates. It's obvious to me that the incident rate is a problem, and it's not a problem that's been going away. And what it does is it pulls it into focus for me maybe the potential for us having a little bit of hubris that's in our field right now, that we really have this thing figured out. And I'm going to raise my hand and say I don't. After almost 30 years of this, I don't have it figured out. I'm not sure that science has it figured out, and I think between all of us, we got to come together and maybe open this can back up and take a look at it, because there's either something going on that's different. There's something going on that we may be doing or not doing in our prevention or programs that is leading to that, or not reducing that incidence of risk, or whatever it is. But I'm not ready to sit here and say we have the answers. And the only reason that the incidence rates are going up is because there's not enough people out there that have the answers, or that are going out and seeking the answers. I think that's a little bit of hubris on our side to think that that's the case. That may be a case for some of this rise, but it's not all of it. And that's a frustrating thing, but it's something that gets me up every day to go to work every day, is to try to unpack some of that and really look at some of those old school things that we've been doing critically. And I think that's okay. I got enough gray in my beard now. I'm okay with looking critical at stuff. A younger version of me, I'd have gotten pretty pissed off if you start looking critical at what I do. And I'd get my ego all fluffed up and start trying to throw some jars back at you in defense mode. I don't have much of a defense right now when it comes to ACLs, and or for that matter, hamstring injuries. I mean, heck, we haven't even solved the hamstring injury problem, much less this ACL problem. So I'm open to it. We're questioning a lot of things that we used to not question, and I think that's a healthy space for us. But it's absolutely something we're seeing. And we can validate what the science is telling us about incident rates going up and all that. We're seeing it day to day here at MJP.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I have this summit is to start a conversation, to educate, the coaches, the players, the parents. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, we'll just talk basketball players, why there's a greater incident in ACLs. But the one thing that I always seem to come back to is a lot of the females that I work with have no strength training, no body weight experience whatsoever. And I mean, I've talked to the UConn strength coach. She's on this interview, the South Carolina women's basketball strength coach, and they're saying they're freshmen. So we're talking these kids are freaks for basketball players. Can't even do a squat or a lunge. So my question, because we could debate the ACL with a bunch of people. Talk about just the importance for why female athletes, girl athletes should be doing some form of strength training, sports performance training.
Well, yeah, number one is because I want them to have an enjoyable experience in sport at a younger age and play it longer. The better athletically they are. I'm not saying they have to turn into this extreme athlete, but the better athletically you are, the better physical competency you have at a younger age, statistics will tell you, you'll play the sport longer. You'll have more fun. Nobody likes to suck. None of the kids we train like to suck. And so if they suck at something and then they play it again and they still suck at something, they stop playing that. And that can start as young as age 10, 11, 12 here in Texas. We see it a lot. At 12, 13, they're done with sport. And what we know is that if they're done with sport at age 12 and 13, they're less likely to be active adults. They're higher likelihood of all these problems that we see when you walk through the airport and you can pick out all the U.S. people because we're all the out-of-shape people. So it feeds a bigger thing for me to improve physical competency, male, female, whatever. Let's give everybody their best chance to realize their full potential for sport, whatever that is, because they'll have more fun. Chances are they'll do it for longer, and they'll be healthier because of it. However, there's also this physical competency that feeds into injury. And I think, nobody likes having surgery either. And so is there a link to physical competency and injury risk? I truly believe that there is. And I would concur probably with the coaches you're talking to, as well as probably any number of surgeons and researchers, that the lower that physical competency is and the higher demands that you're placing on that low physical literacy, if you will, your risk of these other bad things happen. So number one reason to performance train with us is to improve your physical competency so you'll have more fun. People don't buy injury prevention. I mean, they just don't. I don't know if there's any company out there. I'd like to know if there is. Maybe you've heard of one that's a multi-million-dollar business selling injury prevention.
Yeah, I say to people, the best injury prevention program is a solid, strength and conditioning sports performance program.
Right. Yeah. So, I always think that that's all. It's interesting in our profession. We talk about that. Our number one goal is to prevent injuries. Really, I struggle to understand that. I don't know that we're preventing injuries. I'd like to think we're reducing risk of injury, But when we start hanging a shingle out there that we're preventing injuries, boy, I'm not quite sure I'm ready to just jump out there and throw that on a shingle. But certainly if we can elevate physical competency, I think we can all do that. And we can all see where there's some correlatives to this improved physical competency of the basic pillars, right? Strength and speed and stamina, the basic pillars. But then suppleness, movement, mobility, stability, flexibility, skill. Things like proprioception and spatial orientation, movement adequacy. I'm not talking about sports skill. I'm talking about basic motor skill, the underpinnings of sports skill that we have a space to evaluate and train in. And then strategy, strategy, planning, nutrition, workloads, even dynamic things with the brain and dynamic visual acuity and those sorts of things. Those are all spaces that we play in to elevate physical competency. And I think we can all agree, I think, that if we give everybody their best chance physical competency-wise to realize their full potential for their sport, a nice secondary piece of that is we potentially reduce their risk for injury. I think that's about as far as I'm willing to go with that whole mess. But I do believe we do. And I think your point about the young athletes, the female athletes, they are potentially coming into high school sport, junior high sport with a lower level of physical competency. And it's that strength, maybe. Is that mobility, stability? Is that stamina? Is that poor nutrition? I mean, I got on a panel at Perform Better, I think, and one of the guys that I really respect a lot talked about how nutrition may be impacting ACL risk in young athletes, female athletes. Think about that. Has there been any studies to show that nutrition can influence your ACL risk? How about sleep? How does lack of sleep affect your ACL risk? I mean, there are so many questions that come out of that physical competency area beyond just the guy can't squat or the gal can't squat or lunge. I'm not ready to say that that's the first thing or the only thing, but certainly it's a controllable, right? I think those are controllables that I think the meta-analysis of the meta-analysis would say, yeah, let's control as many of those controllables as we can. For me, let's control those because it's going to help them be better at basketball. Let's be really clear about that. It's going to help them be the best version of a basketball player they can be first. Yes, if you tack a couple of these things together, potentially it can reduce your risk. And I see the meta-analysis that I'm sure everybody else reads as well. But I got a question. Are we meta-analyzing good data? I mean, are we pushing a bunch of really good data together? Because I'm not sure all that data, I don't know. I'm not ready to just jump out there and say that if we've got it all figured out. If we elevate these three variables, you'll reduce your risk of injury by X. And the only reason the incidence is going up is because there's not enough of us out there that know that information, and or there's not enough of the athletes, because more athletes are playing sport, that are going through these types of programs. That's where I pause. That's where I'm kind of like pausing. I'm not sure I'm ready to say that that's the reason these incidence rates are going up. Basically the tenet would be less physical competent people. More people are playing sport that are less physically competent than they were before. I think that's probably as far as I'm willing to go when it comes to ACLs. And specifically with females, we do see it. We see low physical competency. But it's not just strength. Yeah.
I think one of the things, and you touched on this, why we want our girls strength training is we want them to be physically competent. But again, they're not going to be athletes for their whole life. So it's just kind of teaching them how to take care of themselves once they go into the real world. They have a real job. They're adults. And I think that's one of the things that I think all the kind of sports performance coaches are agreeing on is we want these girls to be active kind of athletes and adults. But also I find that, being a teenager is tough nowadays. I think if we get girls in the weight room, it absolutely increases their confidence. And I think that's more important than most of the stuff when we're talking about sports. So you and I have covered a lot today, but just kind of wrap up this call. Is there anything else you want to share to all the players, coaches, and parents listening?
I think one is have a healthy sense of being critical about what we do. Don't think that there's any one thing, one silver bullet that's going to prevent or keep you from getting injured. If you play sport, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get injured. And that's unfortunate, but that's the unfortunate reality of it, which basically begs the question, how do we reduce that as much as we can? Get as physically competent as you can. And not just in one element. That's physical competency. That's like saying get really good at math and you're competent. No, not if your English sucks. You're not competent. You may be really good at math, but you may not have the competency. And so for me, the take home for parents and kids, especially the younger you get, build out that template, that full sort of palette of physical competency that you can play off of, those raw ingredients. Top up those good strengths that you have and find somebody that can identify the weaknesses where you're lacking in some of those elements of physical competency, and bolster those things up. It's going to do two things. It's going to probably help you enjoy your sport more, and it will probably, very, very likely, reduce your risk of some of those injuries. But to prevent the injury, if somebody tells you what they're going to do with you is going to prevent an injury, mom, dad, leave. Because it's not, we don't do as much of that as we probably think we do. And that's okay, because we're going to get better every single year at answering that question. So level up that physical competency to reduce some of those risk factors. It's going to help you live a longer, healthier life. It's also going to help you maybe participate in sport, get off the bench, playing a little bit more. Maybe you score a goal instead of just being on the ball. And that's going to elevate what you just talked about, confidence and positivity. And I love sport. I enjoy sport. And then when you're 50 years old, like I am, you still go out and you enjoy sport. You still go out and you're a little bit more active because of that experience that you had. So it's a big, big picture item, and really appreciate the platform that you set up here for people to find some good information about that, and be okay with being a little bit critical of that information too, I think is the take-home message.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, educate, start a conversation. So for everyone that's listening, if they want to find more about what you're doing at Michael Johnson Performance, where can you find you? Social media, website?
Yeah, you can start at the website, michaeljohnsonperformance.com. I guess I'm an interesting follow on Twitter. At MJPLanceW is my Twitter handle. The MJP Twitter handle is at MJP360. We're a training company, not a marketing company. So we're not as flamboyant with our marketing as we maybe should be, but we're going to get more into content and a lot of opportunities for education, and we're doing a lot more of that in the years following now. So really get involved with us, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities to level up kind of the way we see how we do what we do day to day for everybody from kids all the way up to parents, all the way up to high-end, high-performance coaches. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to share at this point. And again, to begin to iterate around some of the concepts that we just talked about. So get involved with us.
Nice. You know what? I enjoyed listening to you at Perform Better. And I'm, again, very happy that you took about a half an hour just to chat with me. I appreciate, your perspective, and I just love chatting with you. So hopefully we'll see each other soon.
I love it. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.